Recording in progress.
Okay, I'm Kendall Kaut. I write for Sigum 365. I also wrote a book called How They Drew It Up. Still available. You missed out on a Christmas present. What an incredible gift. So would a subscription to Sigum 365 as well. Today we're going to talk about Baylor basketball's defense and the improvement that it has shown over the last few months. Sharing the screen on Zoom, we can take a look at Bart Torvik. He's a lot like Ken Palm. He's a lawyer as well as I am. And through Bart Torvik, he does some advanced stats, and he looks at Baylor's offensive and defensive efficiency. And through those stats, he has Baylor right now as the 43rd defense in the country. But when we go down and look at kind of the trend graph about how is Baylor done defensively, they have readily improved over their last 4 games. In fact, when we look at kind of what Torvik's rankings have for Baylor's defense, a few things stick out for the Bears. The first thing that really sticks out to me when I look at their defense to try and get the pages up is how Baylor ranked earlier in this season. So in Baylor's first 7 games, the Bears ranked 204th in defensive efficiency. They were absolutely awful on that end of the floor. But over the last 4 games, the Bears rank 9th in effective defensive efficiency. How's Baylor kind of made that improvement? Well, let's go to some clips to show where Baylor struggled and how the Bears have made it up since then. In Baylor's game against UCLA, they picked up one of the most impressive wins on the season. UCLA is now top 5 in the polls. Really talented team. Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell were major pieces on their Final Four team from 2 seasons ago. Some really talented freshmen joined that roster. But Baylor was able to get the victory behind impressive scoring from Adam Flagler and LJ Cryer. After the game, Mick Cronin mentioned in the press conference when I asked him about Adam Flagler that a lot of people in the Big 12 think he's the best player in the league. That's my assessment as well, though Jalen Wilson has a great case as the player of the year if the season ended today. But in that game, Baylor was able to win because of dominance on offense, not because of good defense. When we go to the clip, what a recurring problem was for Baylor in this game and in a lot of their early season games, maybe excluding Virginia, where they had a lot of their own issues, was that Baylor often was not on the same page with pick and roll coverage, and they let teams get to the middle too often. Baylor runs the no middle defense that kind of got popularized again in the last few years by Mark Adams' system at Texas Tech. Baylor switched to that in the 2019-2020 campaign, where the Bears would have almost assuredly been a #1 seed and won a Big 12 record 23 straight games. During Baylor's successful stretch, their no-middle defense with the likes of Davion Mitchell, who the next season would win National Defensive Player of the Year, Mark Vidal, who was a finalist for National Defensive Player of the Year that season, Jared Butler, who the next season was a semifinalist for National Defensive Player of the Year, and Freddie Gillespie and Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua, respectively, as the primary bigs for Baylor's defense, ensured that Baylor had a top 15 defense the majority of both seasons. They ended up finishing, I think, 23rd during the championship campaign. But as Seth Greenberg and LaFonso Ellis so aptly reminded everybody, that Baylor defense was probably as good as any defense back to UNLV, but was kind of tanked a little bit by their 7-game performance coming back from COVID. So Baylor had a really good defense in 2020, 2021, and in 2022, really top 10 units all 3 seasons, excluding that COVID pause where Baylor wasn't quite the same team, but ultimately, as we know, still won the national championship. But one of the questions entering this campaign was how effectively could Baylor play defense? The concern is that James Akinjo was a really good defender. Jeremy Sohan was the #9 pick in the NBA draft, despite not having a three-point shot and not being a very good free throw shooter. And Kendall Brown had great athleticism. And Matt Meyer in his minutes, by some advanced statistical metrics like Evan Miyakawa's website, evanmaya.com, showed he was one of the best defenders in the country. So you lose all of that wing ability. You lose James Akinjo as a great guard, and then Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua, who did miss the final 6 Big 12 games, but despite that was still co-Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. You started wondering, could this defense be effective? With those numbers I mentioned earlier in the season, the tape also showed some of Baylor's flaws. So in this action, we see Adam Flagler is up top with Tiger Campbell, the point guard here. UCLA is going to set a screen, and so missing Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua, but still like covering Josh O as well, comes up to the level of the screen. And you see there's kind of a miscommunication here. Clearly, Adam expects that Josh is going to be right here so he can provide some resistance, because Baylor's defense, as we've mentioned, is not super well designed if you get middle. And as Dale Bonner reminded me when I talked to him in Las Vegas for about 30 minutes, not a lot of defenses are real happy except the pack line if somebody's going to drive middle. And so once that happens and Josh O's not right here, Tiger Campbell's got a free lane to the hoop. Dale Bonner can't just sit back and have the big man be contested to leave Tiger Campbell lane to the hoop, so he's got to come forward. Langston Love can't rotate off a shooter immediately because Tiger Campbell's right there. Leads to an easy bucket. So all kind of relates back to not on the same page. Adam is defending toward the right side, towards Baylor's bench, so he expects Josh O is going to be right here. Josh O is not right there, can't provide resistance, gets an easy bucket there. And you can kind of see Jared Nunes, who's one of Baylor's two primary defensive coaches, along with Al Brooks right there. Not real thrilled right there because he knows that's not the assignment Baylor wants to have happen. And again, we got some other clips we'll show here that aren't great. So this clip, Virginia had a blistering second half where they were very effective from three in their victory over the Bears. Caleb Lohner plays the 5, which was a very effective lineup in Baylor's scrimmage against UCL or against LSU, excuse me. But miscommunication. Caleb Lohner goes out, expects there's going to be a switch, so he's going to guard Kihei Clark. LJ Cryer doesn't expect a switch, so he's also on Kihei Clark. And Virginia gets the ball low. By the time Caleb Lohner gets it, since he's not 7 feet, he's not going to have any chance. And Virginia will ultimately score there as well. So communication was a recurring issue for Baylor if you went back and looked at the UCLA tape, and if you watch the Virginia tape as well. Once again, we'll watch communicative issues here. So UCLA gets the ball along the wing. Flo Thomba's been switched on to Kihei Clark. He's out in the guard position. Pretty apparent here that Flo Thomba is going to ice. He is set so he wants the screen to go towards the baseline because the baseline can act as another defender. And so Keontae George needs to be out here. So when Kihei Clark comes off the baseline, Keontae George can provide resistance and everything is smooth sailing. But like Josh O in the first clip, another Baylor freshman is in the wrong spot in the pick and roll. Flo Thomba expects Keontae will be here. He's not. Kihei Clark driving middle towards the hoop along the baseline. LJ Cryer has to come up, can't defend there. Caleb Lohner is not going to be able to rotate fast enough. Big man, again, Caleb Lohner is a little faster on the rotation than maybe Josh O would be, or Flo Thomba would be if Flo was in that spot, but not as tall, and that's a Virginia dunk. So really basic stuff that Baylor just did not have down in those first 7 games, led to too many easy buckets, led to open threes consistently. You could make the argument Virginia got too hot in that game and probably wouldn't shoot that well, conceded, but it didn't ultimately matter because they got easy buckets like that time after time. And we'll watch the bucket once more as we get to the next part of our video. Baylor plays Gonzaga in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I have made jokes about South Dakota. Again, I'm a changed man. I'm a new man. I'm in my 30s now. I'm not going to make the jokes I made before. I had somebody tell me, because they saw a photo of me when I was much skinnier 2 years ago, that I looked like I had chemo back then, and now I got to get skinnier again. So I guess jokes on me and this person. But I offended a lot of people in South Dakota, so I apologize for any South Dakota-related jokes. Again, new man, not making South Dakota jokes. But Baylor comes in and plays Gonzaga and Sioux Falls to start out December. And Gonzaga enters this game as the number 1 Ken Pom offense. Baylor enters at number 2 on Ken Pom in offensive efficiency. And Baylor's strategy for this game is pretty apparent about 2 minutes in. They elect Drew Timme is not going to beat us. Baylor will double him. Baylor will not allow their defense to be placed on an island. As a result, Baylor also is going to try and play aggressively in the pick and roll and make sure someone else has to do the dirty work. And if defended against Drew Timme, there are a few principles they will follow about what shoulder they don't want him to get to and trying to make him a jump shooter. Drew Timme had one of his worst outings of the season. In fact, maybe one of his worst outings in his Gonzaga career, as storied as it has been, because Baylor really seems to have had his number over these last 3 seasons, winning the national championship as Timme's team is blown out 3 years ago. And in Sioux Falls, able to get the victory as well. So we'll start with this clip early on in the game. And you see here, they're going to run a side pick and roll. Keontae George here, Flo Thomba there. Baylor decides we're going to fight over the screen. Flo has to drop back into coverage, needs to provide some resistance if Nolan Hickman can get towards the hoop. But clearly Baylor's primary responsibility in this game is do not let Drew Timme beat us. So what happens? Flo provides enough resistance. Hickman becomes a passer. You've got Drew Timme isolated here. And this is where there's really an improvement by Baylor. I could have pulled 5 or 6 clips from the Marquette game and from other games where Flo Thomba and an island was an absolute dumpster fire for Baylor to start the season. But Flo had played very well to end last year's campaign after Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua goes out with injury. Absolutely amazing performance, I thought, in Austin. I was there for the final game of the Drum. As impressed as I'd ever been with Flo Thomba in his Baylor career. Great job then, but we hadn't really seen that from Flo in his first 7 games as a Bear, and certainly not on the defensive end, which has really come around since then. So Flo gets matched up, does a great job, not going to fall for the spin, make Drew Timme a jump shooter. As good as Drew Timme is, he's not Dirk Nowitzki. Comes up, Flo, hand high, meets him, doesn't foul. Horrible shot. You're not going to see Drew Timme miss a shot that badly probably the rest of the campaign. And there for the rebound. So good responsibility. good understanding of the scouting report. Do not let him get to his shoulder. Stay level. Don't leave your feet. Good positioning. Stay strong so he can't bully you. Not going to let him go up. Fade away Drew Timme is not his game. Excellent effort from Flo Thamba there. And I think that's one of the plays that really set the tone for the intensity Baylor would bring defensively and how they were not going to be the same team they had been over those first 7 games. We go to a later clip as the action rolls, and we see here side pick and roll once again. And this is where Baylor got a lot more aggressive with how it wanted to play defense. Scott Drew did a press conference as Baylor, after the Marquette game, elected to fly directly from Milwaukee into Sioux Falls. And from their hotel room in Sioux Falls, Scott Drew mentioned that they were not going to leave players on an island so much. They were going to help out a lot more than they had been helping out in prior contests. So starts here. Dale Bonner stunts off, recognizes Nolan Hickman's not a threat shooting-wise, gets out there, and then is able to come back pretty effectively. Pick and roll is not going to succeed, although Gonzaga's big man rolling to the hoop might think he's open. Jalen Bridges has a very elite wingspan. Not going to happen for him. Once again, they're going to set a pick and roll, and as Josh O had not been good at pick and roll defense, Gonzaga probably feels like, all right, we've got some momentum with Hickman as Bonner has to recover late. Josh O has to rush up to the screen. What's going to happen? Well, what happens here is great team defense from Baylor. Josh O is going to stay on Hickman and provide resistance. The concern here is kind of multifaceted. If Langston Love wants to stunt, is he going to make sure he can stay within one lunge to contest the three-point shooter? Down in the paint, the big man for Gonzaga is going to want to seal Jalen Bridges, so Jalen Bridges needs to make sure he can fight over. Josh O needs to provide resistance. In the corner, Adam Flagler now needs to make sure he can crash down and meet Drew Timme in the paint. And Dale Bonner is going to want to get back to that action as well. So a lot of moving parts between needs to stay on his responsibility for Josh O, can't get sealed if you were Jalen Bridges, need to be stuntable if you were Langston Love, and make sure you don't give up the 3, though. Get into the action so there can't be a pass to Drew Timme if the seal is contested by Jalen Bridges, and then provide some resistance if you're Dale Bonner. So a lot of moving parts, and in college basketball, as in life, the more opportunities you have to screw something up, the more likely it is that it can happen. And so that's why team defense becomes imperative on a play like this. What happens? Bridges does not get sealed. Josh O stays with him well enough so that Nolan Hickman can't really feel confident going up against the lengthier big man. Flagler is starting to stunt down and crash down hard to make sure Timme will not have an easy path to the hoop. Dale Bonner's coming. Langston Love has stunted well to provide some resistance. So if Nolan Hickman's going to go up, it's got to be a little bit tougher journey. And he's made it so with his positioning, it's not going to be an easy pass to the corner, and he'll be one man away. So check on his assignment. Super plus for Jalen Bridges not to get sealed there. Absolutely check there. And then check by Flagler coming down as he intercepts this pass. So we kind of run through it in real time as we get past the Flo Thamba one. You can be like, Kendall, why don't you just make your clips different? Hard to share clips on Zoom, folks, so that's why we do it like this. Shouts to Hugo the Hornet, though, on the cap. So, again, got everybody, real-time pick and roll. And in real action, it doesn't appear like it's that crazy, but it's one of those things when you kind of look at the film, you go back and study what happens, it's all of those little things that have to be correct. And for Baylor, when they looked at those first 7 games, it was a missed pick and roll assignment here, not sure if you're switching there, getting beat middle in one instance, and one small thing in Baylor's defense can add up, right? It's not always going to look as perfect as it did in 2020 or 2021, but everything kind of added up for the Bears. And so leads to the steal and run out there. Additional clip. So we've got a side pick and roll. LJ Cryer's here. Get a fake and go towards the baseline. And this is a good example that Flo Thamba makes sure that if the pick and roll is going to be iced, he's here, understands Drew Timme is not a super threat from the perimeter. And this is where Thamba looks completely different from the player against the Golden Eagles in Milwaukee. So dribble handoff now to Rasir Bolton. Keontae George is going to have to get back out to him. And Flo Thamba now is kind of trapped in what might be viewed as no man's land. And he's got to then handle, how am I going to deal with the next pick and roll? Well, Flo Thamba comes out and provides an excellent contest there for Rasir Bolton. Baylor will live all day with an elbow jumper with Flo Thamba contesting against a small guard. Not a good look, and a stop. So we go back and look at it in real time, kind of focus on how impressive this is. One screen shut down by Thamba. Action goes here, dribble handoff. Flo wisely elects to stay in drop coverage there. Gets back, as focused as he's going to be on Drew Timme, though, he doesn't want Rasir Bolton to get a wide open shot. Stays level, doesn't leave his feet until Bolton leaves his feet. So good effort, good intensity, defending without fouling, and nothing doing for him there. Last clip we'll show. Baylor was down 7 with a minute and a half left. Adam Flagler hits a 3 in transition, gets a step-up screen from Thamba, hits another 3. And so the Bears are now down 1 with 45 seconds left. They know with how prolific Gonzaga's offense is, they probably need to get one more stop to give themselves a good chance to win this game. And it comes here. So with 12 seconds left, Flo Thamba switched on to Nolan Hickman. So that immediately screams horrible mismatch for the Bears. Hickman, much quicker than Thamba, has been really good the last several games. Doesn't matter. Thamba's going to stay attached, not bite, not leave his feet. And that's kind of an instance where Flo, as he's maybe a step back, which is to be expected, does a good job not just thinking, I got to get my hand up high, because that's good situational clock awareness with 9 seconds left. Also impressive by Keontae George to get low enough that he is there. If Flo gets beat, he will make the decision that he can live with Anton Watson taking a 3 in the corner, which shows much better scouting report knowledge by Keontae George. And this game, maybe compared to some earlier games, and that's natural freshman growth as a defender. The intensity for Keontae George is elite. The intelligence is elite. Now it's making sure those things come together on the defensive end as well as they have on the offensive end. So Flo's here, stops him. With 7 seconds left now, Gonzaga's going to say, can we get the ball to Drew Timme? Well, Flags does a great job fronting. Gonzaga decides, you know what, 6 seconds left up front. We don't want to risk a turnover. And note that Keontae George maybe can double. Let's make a cross-court pass. Good job by Keontae to stay with his feet there, to know that, look, if Anton Watson wants to take a 3, we're going to live with that because I'm at least in his vicinity to make the shot more difficult. And then Jalen hustles back. High hands, doesn't leave his feet. So Rasir Bolton can't just jump into him for the 3-point shot. Can't get up. And because Keontae has not sold out 100%, which was a good move to not sell at 100%, knowing a scouting report for Anton Watson, he is now there to provide resistance. He can stunt, hits the ball, loose ball, shot clock violation for Baylor. So once again, it is all of the little things came together for Baylor. If Keontae George doesn't close out properly, it's probably a bucket. If Flagler can't front Timme, it's probably a bucket. If Flo Thamba leaves his feet, a lane to the hoop opens up for Gonzaga. And if Jalen Bridges doesn't contest properly, it's either a shooting foul for Rasir Bolton or it's an opportunity near the bucket. So when we look at kind of how Baylor's defense has played down the stretch, they are now, I believe it is, and we'll go back to our Torvik stats. Pulling up streamable. We don't need that anymore. And so we kind of pull up the data and look at what's happened since then. And we'll stop sharing again for a second because streamable wants to be stupid. Okay. And so we'll look at the data again for Baylor. Over those games, Baylor is now number 9 effective or adjusted defensive efficiency over those last 4 games. Again, small sample size, but when we look at the Torvik stats, you look at the balls, and green is good, red is bad. And Baylor's adjusted defensive efficiency to open the campaign, not good. 101.4, not happening against Norfolk State, who's a solid team, but not elite. That 118.7 against Virginia is absolutely catastrophic, about as bad as defense could be. 121.3 per 100 possessions could not be much worse. But then you look at Gonzaga. Holding the Zags to 71.8 per 100 possessions is just unheard of. 86.7 against the Tarleton State team without Adam Flagler or LJ Cryer. A good 92.7 against Washington State and American Airlines Arena. And then a dominant 79.7 against Northwestern State, once again without your best player, Adam Flagler. Shows how good the Bears have been defensively over these last games. Now, the question for Baylor is, can the offense now return to that level? Over those last 4, Baylor is sub 200 in adjusted offensive efficiency. But my hope and what I believe is the Bears will get back to reality for how good the offense will be, because Keontae George has shown out in Sioux Falls against Gonzaga. Adam Flagler looked really good in all of the games this season when he's played, and has not played in 2 of those 4 games, which I think explains Baylor's malaise. And so I'm expecting Baylor's offense to return to form. And with what I saw against Gonzaga, I think there are real building blocks to where Baylor can indeed be a top 30 defense and I feel very confident Baylor will be a top 10 offense the rest of the way. You combine those, and I don't think this is a crown Kansas right now, Big 12. I think it is once again, as it has been the last 3 years, two teams that have established themselves as the premier programs in the Big 12, Baylor and Kansas, and I expect to battle the rest of the way. I appreciate it from everybody, and we'll do more of these later.